I'm Natalie, 32 years old and pregnant with my first child. Pregnancy should be magical, filled with anticipation and joy as you prepare to welcome new life. My sister Amber and I were always close despite our complicated relationship. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. I never imagined my own sister would steal something so precious, my ultrasound, and pretend my baby was hers. If you've ever had a family member betray your trust, give this video a like and let me know where you're watching from. This story still breaks my heart to tell. Michael and I had been married for 3 wonderful years before we decided to try for a baby. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in suburban Boston. Nothing fancy, but it was our home, filled with love and dreams of expanding our family. The nursery-to-be was currently my home office, a small room with soft yellow walls that caught the morning sunlight perfectly. I had already imagined how we'd transform it once our baby arrived. As a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital, I spent my days caring for other people's children. The irony wasn't lost on me that helping sick kids heal was my passion, yet creating a child of our own proved challenging. For 18 months, we tried. Each negative pregnancy test felt like a tiny heartbreak. I tracked ovulation, changed my diet, tried acupuncture. Anything that might help. Michael remained my rock through it all, never allowing me to lose hope. Amber is my younger sister, just 2 years between us, but sometimes it felt like we were from different planets. Growing up, our relationship was defined by her constant need to have whatever I had. When I got a new backpack for school, Amber would throw a tantrum until Mom bought her an identical one. When I made the volleyball team, suddenly Amber was interested in volleyball too. This pattern continued through our teenage years. My first boyfriend wasn't safe from Amber's attention. My college choice became her college choice. And even my first apartment layout was mysteriously duplicated when Amber moved out. Our parents unwittingly encouraged this behavior. Mom always had a soft spot for Amber. My father described her as delicate and in need of extra attention. Dad tried to remain neutral, but he worked long hours and often missed the subtle dynamics playing out between us. I learned early to keep special things private, to carve out experiences that were just mine. It wasn't healthy, but it was survival. In recent years, Amber's life had been a series of disappointments. She jumped between jobs, retail management, real estate assistant, personal trainer, never sticking with anything longer than 8 months. Her romantic life followed a similar pattern. Guys were initially drawn to her vibrant personality and striking looks. Amber had the same dark hair as me, but with natural waves I'd always envied, and green eyes that people commented on wherever she went. But relationships fizzled once partners discovered her tendency toward dramatic emotions and competitive nature. Her most recent boyfriend, Jackson, seemed different. They dated for nearly 2 years, a record for Amber. He was stable, kind, and worked as an architect. They talked about marriage, about building a life together. Then suddenly, they broke up. Amber was devastated but tight-lipped about what happened. Through mutual friends, I learned that Jackson wanted children and Amber had been hesitant, changing her mind repeatedly until he couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. After their breakup, Amber's fixation on finding a partner and starting a family intensified. Every conversation circled back to her biological clock, her fears of ending up alone, her jealousy of friends posting baby announcements on social media. I tried to be supportive while gently suggesting therapy might help her work through these feelings. She dismissed the idea immediately. When I discovered I was pregnant after 1.5 years of trying, I was ecstatic and terrified simultaneously. The 2 pink lines on that test represented everything we'd been hoping for. Michael cried when I told him, placing his hand on my still flat stomach and whispering hello to our baby. We agreed to wait until the 12-week mark to tell extended family, though I couldn't resist sharing the news with my parents right away. Mom and Dad were thrilled. Their first grandchild was on the way. They promised to keep our secret until we were ready for a broader announcement. I debated telling Amber early, knowing her emotional state had been fragile since her breakup with Jackson. Michael suggested waiting, reminding me how she'd reacted to my promotion last year. with forced smiles and then a week of distant behavior. But she was my sister. If I couldn't share this joy with her, what did that say about our relationship? So I invited her for coffee at my favorite local bakery, a neutral space where I could gauge her reaction. When I told her, Amber's face cycled through several emotions: surprise, something unreadable, then what appeared to be genuine happiness. She hugged me tight, asked when I was due, and immediately began talking about hosting my baby shower. Her enthusiasm seemed sincere, and I felt relieved. Maybe this baby would bring us closer together. In the following weeks, Amber texted daily asking how I was feeling. She brought over ginger candies when morning sickness hit, researched prenatal vitamins, and seemed invested in my pregnancy journey. Yet something felt off about her sudden, intense interest. The questions became increasingly specific about my doctor's appointments, the exact dates of ultrasounds, which hospital I deliver at. I attributed my unease to pregnancy hormones, making me paranoid. Then I caught her looking through my purse one afternoon while I was in the bathroom. When confronted, she laughed it off, saying she was looking for a mint. I didn't mention that the mints were visible in the outer pocket, nowhere near where her hands had been. Looking back, I should have recognized these as the first red flags. But I wanted so badly to believe my sister was simply excited about becoming an aunt. I ignored the warning signs, a decision I would soon regret. My first trimester was rough. Morning sickness hit me hard, except it wasn't just morning sickness, it was all-day sickness. I lost 7 pounds instead of gaining weight, something my doctor monitored closely. The fatigue was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I'd fall asleep on the couch by 8 every evening, sometimes mid-conversation with Michael. Despite the discomfort, each symptom reassured me that hormones were flowing and our baby was developing. At 8 weeks, we had our first ultrasound appointment. The grainy black and white image on the screen didn't look like much to the untrained eye, but to us, it was everything. The rapid fluttering of that tiny heart, 167 beats per minute, brought tears to my eyes. The technician printed several copies, which immediately became my most treasured possession. One went into my wallet, one on the refrigerator, and the others in a special memory box I'd purchased specifically for pregnancy mementos. When we reached the 12-week mark, Michael and I hosted a small dinner party to share our news with close friends and extended family. I prepared my grandmother's lasagna recipe, and Michael decorated the dining room with subtle hints: a small pair of baby shoes as the table centerpiece, sonogram photos tucked into the corner of a framed family picture. We didn't announce anything immediately, waiting to see if anyone would notice the clues. Amber arrived 20 minutes early, offering to help set up. She wore a new dress and seemed unusually interested in the table arrangements. When our friends Rachel and her husband Tom arrived, followed by Michael's brother James and his wife Sarah, the evening began in earnest. The conversation flowed along with the wine, sparkling cider for me, and finally, during dessert, my brother-in-law James spotted the sonogram. "Wait a minute," he said, pointing toward the frame. "Is that what I think it is?" Michael squeezed my hand under the table as we confirmed the news. The room erupted in congratulations, hugs, and excited questions about due dates and gender preferences. Amber's reaction was subdued compared to everyone else's. She smiled and offered congratulations, but I noticed her eyes didn't quite match her expression. When Rachel asked how I was feeling, Amber interrupted before I could answer. "She's been so sick," Amber said, as if she were the authority on my pregnancy. "Much worse than most women. The doctor is a bit concerned." This wasn't true. My doctor had assured me that while unpleasant, my symptoms were normal. When I corrected her, Amber laughed it off as a misunderstanding, but I caught a flash of something in her expression. Annoyance? Embarrassment? I couldn't quite place it. As weeks passed, Amber's presence at our house increased. She dropped by unannounced, offering to help with chores or bringing prenatal-friendly snacks. While I appreciated the support, her hovering began to feel intrusive. She'd rearranged things in our kitchen, claiming she was organizing better for when baby comes. She asked detailed questions about my medical care that felt beyond normal interest. Which doctor are you seeing again? What's her specialty? Does she have hospital privileges at both Mercy and General, or just one? What time are your appointments usually scheduled for? Michael started expressing concern about Amber's overly involved behavior. It's like she's the one having the baby, he commented one night after she'd left. Did you notice how she corrected you about your due date? As if you wouldn't know when your own child is due. I brushed off his concerns, attributing Amber's behavior to excitement about becoming an aunt. But deep down, something felt wrong. The sister who had always competed with me was now intensely focused on my pregnancy, almost as if she were studying it. At 16 weeks, I posted our first social media announcement, a simple picture of Michael and me holding the ultrasound image with a caption, "Baby Wilson, arriving August 2025. Comments flooded in from friends and colleagues, offering congratulations and well wishes. Amber's comment stood out. I know exactly how you're feeling right now. Such a special time. The wording struck me as odd. How could she know exactly how I was feeling? As my second trimester progressed, I began to show. The small bump became impossible to hide, and I embraced it, finally feeling like my pregnancy was real and visible to the world. I started a private online journal documenting each milestone, each flutter and kick. I recorded waist measurements, symptoms, and emotions, creating a keepsake for our child someday. My 20-week anatomy scan was a highlight, the detailed ultrasound showing perfect little fingers and toes, spine and organs developing right on schedule. We decided to learn the baby's sex, overjoyed to discover we were having a little girl. The technician printed several images, including a 3D rendering that clearly showed her facial features. These precious photos joined the others in my memory box, which I kept on my bedside table. A week later, I noticed the box had been moved slightly. The ribbon I'd unconsciously wrapped a certain way was tied differently. When I opened it, everything seemed to be there, but something felt off about the arrangement. I mentioned it to Michael, who suggested I might have moved it while dusting. Pregnancy brain was real. We joked I'd already forgotten appointments and misplaced my keys more in the past few months than in the previous year. Around this time, Amber's behavior shifted again. She began canceling our plans together, claiming work was busy or she wasn't feeling well. Our usual Sunday brunch tradition fell by the wayside. She remained engaged via text, always asking for updates about the baby, but in-person meetings became rare. When I asked if everything was okay, she assured me she was just giving me space to rest and prepare for motherhood. I didn't realize then that her absence wasn't about giving me space at all. Amber was busy constructing an elaborate deception that would nearly destroy our family. At 24 weeks pregnant, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. My energy had returned, the nursery was coming together, and we'd begun childbirth classes at the local hospital. Life felt good, challenging but good. Michael had been promoted at work, which meant longer hours temporarily but better paternity leave when the baby arrived. We were making it work, tackling this new chapter together. One Saturday morning, while organizing the nursery closet, I decided to look through my memory box, wanting to compare my 20-week ultrasound with the 24-week images we'd just received. As I sorted through the photos, a cold realization hit me. One of the 3D ultrasound images from the 20-week appointment was missing. I emptied the entire box, searching frantically, but it wasn't there. I called for Michael, who helped me search the bedroom, thinking it might have fallen out. We checked under the bed, in drawers, between books on the nightstand, nowhere. I tried to remember the last time I'd looked through the box. Amber had visited 3 days ago, bringing a baby blanket she'd found at a boutique. She'd been alone in our bedroom for a few minutes when I answered a phone call. You don't think? Michael started, then stopped himself. No, I said firmly. She wouldn't. I tried to dismiss the thought, but a knot formed in my stomach. I texted Amber casually, asking if she'd seen the ultrasound photo when she was over. She replied quickly, too quickly, denying she'd been in the bedroom at all during her visit. This was an obvious lie. I'd walked in and found her looking at the framed photos on our dresser. 2 days later, my friend Rachel called, her voice bubbling with excitement. I can't believe you didn't tell me Amber is pregnant too. This is amazing. Cousins who'll be the same age. When is she due? My blood ran cold.
What are you talking about?
Amber isn't pregnant. Rachel's confusion was evident, but she just announced it on Instagram yesterday. She posted an ultrasound picture and everything. She's having a girl too, due in August. I assumed you knew. My hands shaking, I thanked Rachel and hung up. I immediately opened Instagram, where Amber's post awaited at the top of my feed. There it was, my missing ultrasound image with the caption, "Overjoyed to announce baby girl Thompson coming August 2025. Jackson and I couldn't be happier to start our family together." The post included hashtags about rainbow babies and miracles after struggling. The room spun around me. Jackson, her ex-boyfriend, was tagged, though he hadn't responded or liked the post. The ultrasound image was unmistakably mine, the same one missing from my memory box. The due date she claimed was mere days from my actual due date. I called Amber immediately, my heart pounding. She answered cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. "How could you?" I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "That's my ultrasound, Amber. My baby." "What are you talking about?" she replied, her tone defensive. "I'm pregnant too, Natalie. I know it's hard for you to not be the center of attention for once, but you could at least be happy for me. I've been trying to get pregnant for 18 months. You broke up with Jackson weeks ago." "This is impossible."
"We got back together," she snapped.
"It happened fast, yes, but these things happen. I'm hanging up now. Your jealousy is really disappointing." Before I could respond, she ended the call. I sat frozen, staring at my phone. Within minutes, my parents called, thrilled about Amber's news. They gushed about having 2 grandchildren arriving at the same time, how special it would be for our family. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, not over the phone, not when they sounded so happy. Michael was furious when he came home and learned what had happened. He wanted to call my parents immediately to confront Amber publicly. I hesitated, concerned about my sister's mental state. What would drive her to such an elaborate lie? Part of me worried that publicly exposing her would push her over some edge. "She stole our baby's image, Natalie," Michael said firmly. "She's pretending your pregnancy is hers. This isn't just weird, it's disturbing." He was right, of course. But I needed evidence beyond just my missing photo. I needed to understand the extent of her deception before confronting her. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked a mutual friend to send me screenshots of her private messages with Amber. What I discovered was chilling. For weeks, Amber had been sending friends detailed messages about her pregnancy journey. She described morning sickness identical to mine, cravings that matched mine exactly, and doctor's appointments scheduled suspiciously close to my own. She'd even told people she was seeing my obstetrician, Dr. Levine, though she claimed to be at a different office location. Most disturbing were the additional ultrasound images she'd shared privately, all stolen from my memory box, I now realized. Photos I hadn't even noticed were missing. She'd crafted an entire fictional pregnancy narrative, mirroring my experience week by week, staying just behind my timeline so she could copy my symptoms and milestones. That night, I barely slept. The betrayal cut deep, but beyond my own hurt, I worried about Amber. This wasn't normal jealousy or attention-seeking behavior. This was something far more concerning. What would happen when August arrived and she had no baby to present? How far would she take this charade? The following weeks brought a surreal escalation to Amber's deception. At 26 weeks pregnant, I attended a family dinner at my parents' home, dreading the inevitable confrontation with Amber. When she arrived, I froze in disbelief. She wore a fitted dress with what appeared to be a pregnancy bump, smaller than mine, but unmistakable. She had purchased a prosthetic belly or patted herself to maintain the illusion. Throughout dinner, she mimicked my symptoms with unsettling precision. When I mentioned heartburn, she placed her hand on her false bump and complained about experiencing the same. When I declined wine, she made a show of requesting sparkling water for the baby. She even excused herself to the bathroom at one point, returning with comments about the baby pressing on her bladder. My parents were completely taken in, enchanted by the idea of their daughters sharing this journey simultaneously. Mom talked excitedly about the joint baby shower she was planning, while Dad beamed with pride at the thought of 2 grandchildren. I remained mostly silent, watching this performance unfold, still uncertain how to address it without causing a family implosion. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his expression conveying both support and concern. We'd agreed to gather more evidence before confronting Amber and my parents, but watching this charade was becoming unbearable. 3 days after my gender reveal party, where close friends and family celebrated our news of expecting a girl, Amber announced on social media that she too was having a girl. The timing was no coincidence. She'd waited just long enough to make it seem like her appointment had fallen after mine, rather than copying my news outright. The situation grew more bizarre when I discovered Amber had created a baby registry with items nearly identical to those on my own. The same crib, the same stroller system, even the same unique handmade mobile I'd found from an artisan in Maine. When friends mentioned the similarity, she laughed it off as sister telepathy. More concerning was learning that her new boyfriend, Brian. Yes, suddenly there was a Brian instead of a reconciled Jackson, believed completely in her pregnancy. Through social media, I gleaned that they'd met only weeks ago at a coffee shop. He appeared in her photos proudly touching her fake bump, accompanying her to what she claimed were doctor's appointments. In one particularly troubling post, she tagged the same maternal boutique where I'd purchased maternity clothes, claiming they'd had a special mom-to-be shopping day. I attempted several times to speak with Amber privately, calling and texting to suggest we meet alone. Each time, she deflected or outright refused, always with an excuse. She wasn't feeling well. Brian had planned a surprise. She needed to rest. When I drove to her apartment unannounced one afternoon, she refused to open the door, texting that she was following doctor's orders to reduce stress. Finally, I convinced her to meet at our parents' house, thinking a neutral location might help. This proved disastrous. When I calmly presented the evidence, the stolen ultrasound images, the copied timeline, the impossibility of her pregnancy given her recent relationship status, she erupted in tears. Between sobs, she accused me of trying to ruin her happiness out of jealousy. My parents, witnessing this breakdown, immediately rushed to comfort her. "Natalie, how could you say such things?" my mother demanded, her arm around Amber's shoulders. "Your sister is pregnant. Why would she lie about something so important? Because she's done this before," I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "She's always wanted what I have. But this time it's gone too far. You've always been jealous of your sister's happiness," my father said, his disappointment evident. "I thought you'd grown out of this competition." I was stunned into silence. Somehow, I had become the villain in this scenario. Amber continued to sob dramatically, while shooting me triumphant glances when our parents weren't looking. Michael, who had remained silent until this point, finally spoke up. "With all due respect," he said firmly, "Amber stole our ultrasound images. We have proof. She's lying to everyone, including Brian. This isn't healthy, and enabling it isn't helping anyone." My parents dismissed his concerns as loyalty to me, suggesting we leave to let Amber rest. As we drove home, the full weight of the situation crushed down on me. Not only was my sister perpetuating an elaborate fraud, but my parents were unwittingly supporting it. Worse, they now viewed me as the problem. The stress began affecting my actual pregnancy. At my 28-week appointment, Dr. Levine noted my elevated blood pressure with concern. She asked about stressors in my life, and the whole story came tumbling out. Her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine alarm as I explained the situation. "Natalie, this level of stress isn't good for you or your baby," she warned. "I'm concerned about the potential for preeclampsia if your blood pressure remains elevated. You need to prioritize your health and your baby's well-being, even if that means creating distance from this situation temporarily." Her medical advice gave me permission to step back. Michael and I agreed to limit contact with my family until after the baby arrived, focusing instead on preparing for our daughter's birth in a positive environment. We changed our phone numbers, adjusted privacy settings on social media, and informed close friends about the situation, asking them not to share our personal information or updates. During this period of limited contact, Michael took it upon himself to reach out to Jackson, Amber's ex-boyfriend whom she initially claimed was her baby's father. Jackson confirmed they hadn't spoken in months, let alone reconciled. He was shocked to hear about her pregnancy claims and expressed concern about her mental state. Armed with this additional confirmation, I compiled all evidence. Timestamps on my original ultrasound images, medical records confirming my appointments, screenshots of Amber's posts, testimonies from friends about her contradictory statements. I hoped this documentation would eventually help my parents understand the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, Amber's deception continued to escalate. She began borrowing my maternity clothes from our parents' house, where I'd stored some items from my first trimester. She posted photos wearing my distinctive blue maternity dress, the one Michael had given me for our anniversary. She copied my pregnancy workout routine, my nutritional choices, even the books I'd mentioned reading about childbirth. The breaking point came when Amber announced on social media that her due date was August 12th, the exact date Dr. Levine had confirmed for my delivery. No longer was she maintaining even the pretense of a different timeline. She had fully co-opted my pregnancy as her own, down to the very day our daughter was expected to arrive. As my third trimester progressed and the reality of impending motherhood set in, I struggled to balance preparing for our baby with the ongoing family drama. The nursery was ready, hospital bags packed, birth plan finalized, all the practical aspects were in order. But the emotional toll of Amber's deception and my parents' misplaced support weighed heavily on me. How would we navigate family visits after the birth? Would Amber maintain her charade even then? How would she explain her own lack of a baby when August 12th arrived? These questions would be answered sooner than I expected, and in a way none of us could have anticipated. At 32 weeks pregnant, Dr. Levine referred me to a maternal fetal medicine specialist for additional monitoring due to my persistent high blood pressure. The appointment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at Boston Maternal Care, a practice affiliated with the hospital where I planned to deliver. Michael took the morning off work to accompany me, both of us anxious about what the specialist might say. The evening before the appointment, I received a text from Rachel that made my heart drop. Just heard Amber talking about her appointment with a specialist tomorrow at Boston Maternal Care. Weird coincidence, right? No coincidence at all. Somehow, Amber had learned about my referral and scheduled her own appointment at the same practice, likely on the same day. Rather than alert the doctor's office about the situation, Michael and I made a decision. We would allow events to unfold naturally. If Amber had indeed made an appointment using false pretenses, medical professionals would quickly identify the deception. We arrived at the office 15 minutes early, checking in and taking seats in the waiting room. I felt strangely calm, as if we'd reached a turning point where truth would finally prevail. 20 minutes later, Amber walked in with Brian. She faltered momentarily upon seeing us, but quickly recovered, plastering on a smile and approaching. "What a coincidence," she exclaimed, her voice artificially bright. "They referred me to a specialist too. Blood pressure issues run in families, I guess." Brian smiled politely, extending his hand to Michael. He appeared genuinely excited, his hand protectively placed on Amber's lower back. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, an innocent bystander about to have his world upended. "How far along are you now?" he asked me conversationally. 32 weeks, I replied, watching Amber's expression carefully. "Us too," she jumped in before Brian could respond. "Due August 12th. The receptionist called my name before I could respond, and Michael and I were escorted to an exam room. The specialist, Dr. Patterson, was thorough and kind, reviewing my history and performing an ultrasound to check on the baby. Everything looked good despite the blood pressure concerns, and she prescribed modified bed rest and additional monitoring for the remainder of my pregnancy. As we finished the appointment, Dr. Patterson mentioned casually, "I see your sister is also pregnant and has an appointment today. Twins run in families, but shared due dates are quite the coincidence." I exchanged glances with Michael before responding carefully. Yes, quite the coincidence. Dr. Patterson must have sensed something in my tone because she paused, looking at me more intently. Is everything okay between you two? Family support is important during pregnancy. I hesitated, then decided honesty was necessary. Doctor, my sister isn't actually pregnant. She's been pretending, using my ultrasound images and copying my pregnancy timeline. I believe she may have made this appointment under false pretenses. Dr. Patterson's expression shifted from confusion to concern. I see. This is unusual. I can't discuss another patient with you, of course, but I appreciate you sharing this information. Patient safety is our priority. We left the exam room and headed toward the exit, passing the waiting area where Brian sat alone, scrolling through his phone. Amber must have been called in for her appointment. Part of me wanted to leave immediately to avoid the inevitable confrontation, but Michael squeezed my hand, and we took seats across from Brian, waiting. 30 minutes later, we heard raised voices from down the hallway. A door opened, and Amber's voice became clearly audible, high-pitched and frantic. You don't understand. I am pregnant. Check again. Dr. Patterson's response was calm but firm. Miss Thompson, as I've explained, there is no evidence of pregnancy. I've performed an ultrasound and blood work, both confirming you are not pregnant. I'd like to discuss some resources that might help you work through this situation. Amber emerged from the hallway, her face tear-streaked and contorted with anger. When she spotted us in the waiting room, she froze. Brian stood, confusion evident on his face. What's going on? He asked, looking between Amber and the doctor who had followed her into the waiting area. Amber's composure crumbled entirely. They're lying. Natalie put them up to this, because she's jealous. I'm pregnant, Brian. I've shown you the ultrasounds. Dr. Patterson maintained her professional demeanor despite the outburst. Sir, I understand this is confusing and distressing. Would you like to step into a private room to discuss this further? Brian looked shell-shocked, his gaze darting between Amber and the doctor. Are you saying she's not pregnant? But the pictures, the appointments, the everything. Amber lunged toward me suddenly, her finger pointing accusingly. Tell them, Natalie. Tell them I'm pregnant too. Why are you doing this to me? A security guard appeared, summoned by the receptionist who had triggered a silent alarm. The situation was escalating rapidly, with Amber becoming more hysterical by the moment. Despite everything she'd put me through, watching my sister's public breakdown was heartbreaking. This wasn't the resolution I'd wanted. I think we should call your parents, I said quietly to Amber. And maybe a therapist. I don't need a therapist, she screamed, drawing attention from everyone in the waiting room. I need people to stop lying about me. Brian had backed away, the reality of the situation clearly dawning on him. The ultrasound in your apartment, he said slowly. It has Natalie's name on it, doesn't it? I never looked closely, but it's there. Amber's expression crumpled, the last vestiges of her deception falling away. I was going to have a baby, she whispered. I was supposed to have one by now. Jackson left because I couldn't commit to having children, but then when I was ready, he was gone. It's not fair that she gets everything. It's never been fair. The raw pain in her voice pierced through my anger. This wasn't just jealousy or attention-seeking behavior. My sister was deeply unwell, caught in a delusion that had spiraled far beyond her control. Dr. Patterson spoke gently to Amber. Let's find you a quiet place to sit down. Would you like me to call someone for you? A mental health professional could be helpful right now. Amber's response was to sink to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The security guard and a nurse helped her to a private room, while Dr. Patterson spoke quietly with Brian, who looked completely overwhelmed by the revelation. I only met her 8 weeks ago, I overheard him say. She told me she was already pregnant when we met, that the father wasn't in the picture. I had no idea, none of it was real. His shock quickly turned to anger. He approached me before leaving, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and rage. Did you know she was doing this the whole time? Why didn't anyone stop her? We tried, Michael explained. Her family believed her over us. Brian shook his head in disbelief. Tell her not to contact me again. I can't, this is too much. With that, he walked out, another casualty of Amber's elaborate deception. The clinic staff contacted my parents, explaining that Amber needed immediate support. They arrived 30 minutes later, confused and concerned. The doctor took them aside for a private conversation, presumably explaining the situation. When they emerged, my mother was crying, and my father looked ashen. For the first time, they saw the reality of what had been happening. Their younger daughter hadn't been experiencing a miracle pregnancy alongside her sister. She had fabricated an entire false narrative, complete with stolen medical images and a prosthetic belly. Their perfect vision of dual grandchildren arriving together shattered in an instant. As Amber was sedated and prepared for transport to a psychiatric evaluation, my mother approached me tentatively. Natalie, I don't understand. How did we not see this? It wasn't the time for recriminations or I told you so moments. My sister needed help, and my parents needed support adjusting to this shocking reality. Despite everything, they were still my family. We'll figure it out, I said, placing a hand on my very real pregnant belly. But first, Amber needs professional help. The family that had fractured under the weight of an elaborate deception now faced a different challenge, helping one daughter through a mental health crisis while supporting another through the final weeks of pregnancy. As we left the medical office that day, nothing was resolved, but at least the truth was finally out in the open. The days following the doctor's office revelation were chaotic and emotionally draining. Amber was admitted to the psychiatric unit at Boston General Hospital for evaluation and treatment. The initial diagnosis was severe depression with psychotic features, complicated by what the psychiatrist described as factitious disorder, the medical term for fabricating illness or, in this case, pregnancy. My parents were devastated, struggling to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the one who had constructed such an elaborate deception. They spent most days at the hospital, attempting to understand Amber's condition and treatment plan. Mom called me nightly with updates, her voice hollow with exhaustion and guilt. The doctor says she's been having these thoughts for months, she told me one evening. Ever since Jackson broke up with her. She genuinely believed at some points that she was pregnant, that she deserved to be pregnant more than you. The unspoken question hung between us. How had they missed the signs? How had they enabled her behavior to reach this breaking point? A week after Amber's hospitalization, the hospital arranged a family therapy session with Amber's treatment team. Michael offered to come with me, but I decided to attend alone with my parents. This was something the three of us needed to address together before bringing partners into the conversation. The session was brutal in its honesty. Amber, heavily medicated but lucid, sat across from us in a conference room, a social worker and psychiatrist facilitating the discussion. She looked smaller somehow, the false confidence stripped away along with the prosthetic pregnancy belly she'd been wearing. I want to understand why, I said when given the opportunity to speak. Not just why you pretended to be pregnant, but why my pregnancy specifically. Why steal my ultrasound? Why copy my due date? Amber stared at her hands for a long moment before answering. Because you always get everything first, she finally said, her voice barely audible. You got married first, you got pregnant first. You're the nurse saving children while I can't even keep a job for a full year. Mom and Dad are always so proud of you. That's not true, my mother interjected. We've always been proud of both our girls. The therapist raised a hand gently. Mrs. Wilson, please let Amber express her feelings without contradiction. These are her perceptions, whether or not they align with your intentions. Amber continued, her words gaining strength. When you announced your pregnancy, it was like something broke inside me. Jackson left because I couldn't decide about having children, and then suddenly you're having one, and everyone's so excited. I felt invisible. I thought if I was pregnant too, people would see me again. But then it wasn't enough to be pregnant. I needed to have what you had, the same due date, the same gender, the same experience. The psychiatrist explained that Amber's behavior reflected deeper issues than simple jealousy. Years of comparison, Perceived favoritism and recent relationship trauma had culminated in this break from reality. The fake pregnancy became a way to secure love and attention she felt she was missing, while simultaneously attempting to reclaim a sense of identity separate from being Natalie's sister. My parents were forced to confront their role in the dynamic. Dad admitted he'd often compare us growing up, usually favoring my achievements because they were more conventional and easier to understand. Mom acknowledged treating Amber as more fragile, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where Amber never developed resilience. For my part, I recognized how I'd withdrawn over the years, protecting myself from Amber's competitive nature rather than addressing it directly. In trying to avoid conflict, I'd helped maintain an unhealthy pattern. The session ended with no neat resolution, just a commitment to continued therapy and honest communication. As I prepared to leave, Amber asked if she could speak to me alone for a moment. The therapist approved and my parents stepped out. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry." I nodded, unable to offer forgiveness just yet, but acknowledging her apology. Get better, Amber. That's what matters now. Making the difficult decision to create distance from Amber during her treatment was necessary for my health and my baby's. Dr. Patterson had been clear. My blood pressure remained concerning, and stress was a significant factor. Michael and I agreed that while I would remain informed about Amber's progress, direct contact would be limited until after our daughter's birth. This decision created additional tension with my parents, who struggled to divide their attention between their hospitalized daughter and their pregnant one. They seemed to expect me to visit Amber regularly, to participate actively in her recovery despite my own precarious health situation. "She's asking about you," Mom would say during our phone calls. Just a short visit would mean so much to her. Michael finally intervened after one particularly upsetting call left me in tears. He phoned my parents directly, explaining in no uncertain terms that my health and our baby's well-being had to be the priority. "Natalie will be there for Amber when she can," he told them. "But right now, she needs to focus on bringing your grandchild safely into the world. That has to be enough." His firmness created a boundary my parents reluctantly respected, though the underlying tension remained. They visited us less frequently, divided between hospital visits with Amber and preparations for their grandchild. When they did come over, conversations felt strained, important topics avoided in favor of superficial discussions about nursery colors and baby clothes. The impact on our extended family varied widely. My father's sister, Aunt Judith, immediately took my side, having witnessed Amber's attention-seeking behavior over the years. My mother's family largely rallied around Amber, viewing her as the victim of mental illness who needed support rather than judgment. Family gatherings were put on hold indefinitely, the fracture too raw to navigate in larger settings. Meanwhile, the practical aspects of preparing for motherhood continued. I began maternity leave at 34 weeks, focusing on rest and stress reduction. Michael transformed our home into a sanctuary, limiting visitors and screening calls. Friends like Rachel stepped up beautifully, organizing meal deliveries and offering practical support without bringing drama to our doorstep. After 2 weeks of treatment, Amber was released from the hospital with an outpatient treatment plan. My parents brought her to their home rather than returning her to her apartment, a decision I supported despite our strained relationship. She needed supervision and support that only family could provide. During her first week home, Amber sent me a letter, handwritten on actual stationery, not a text or email. In it, she expressed genuine remorse, acknowledging the hurt she'd caused and the trust she'd broken. She explained that her therapist had suggested writing as a way to communicate honestly without the pressure of face-to-face interaction. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I want you to know I'm working hard to understand why I did what I did. The doctors say it will be a long process, but I'm committed to getting better. Not just for you or Mom and Dad, but for myself." The letter touched me, its vulnerability suggesting real progress. I wrote back a brief note expressing appreciation for her honesty and wishing her well in her recovery. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, a small first step. Amber's initial progress in therapy seemed promising, but after returning to our parents' home, she experienced setbacks. Mom reported that she'd stopped taking medication consistently and had missed therapy appointments. She'd become fixated on my approaching due date, repeatedly asking when she could meet her niece and making comments about how she almost had a daughter too. These reports concerned me deeply. Despite professional intervention, Amber seemed unable to fully separate herself from the pregnancy narrative she'd created. My parents struggled to navigate this behavior, torn between enforcing boundaries and avoiding triggers that might worsen her fragile mental state. With just 3 weeks until my due date, I found myself in the painful position of setting firm boundaries with my parents. Michael and I invited them to dinner, where I explained as gently as possible that Amber would not be welcome at the hospital when our daughter was born, nor during our first weeks home. "This isn't punishment," I explained, seeing the hurt in their eyes. "This is protection, for our daughter, for me, and honestly, for Amber too. Putting her in a situation that might trigger another episode wouldn't be fair to anyone." My father nodded slowly, beginning to understand. My mother was less accepting, suggesting I was being overly cautious and denying Amber the chance to make things right. "Making things right doesn't happen in a delivery room," Michael said firmly. "It happens through consistent therapy and respecting boundaries. We're not saying never, we're saying not yet." They left that evening with a clearer understanding of our position, if not complete acceptance. As my due date approached, I found myself in the strange position of preparing for childbirth while emotionally distanced from half my family. It wasn't what I'd imagined for this special time, but it was necessary. The final weeks of pregnancy passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, last-minute preparations, and increasing discomfort. Despite the family strain, I found moments of pure joy, feeling my daughter's hiccups, watching Michael assemble the crib, folding tiny clothes for our soon-to-arrive baby. This was still our miracle, our long-awaited child, regardless of the circumstances surrounding her arrival. 3 weeks before my scheduled due date, I woke at 2 a.m. with unmistakable contractions. They were still 15 minutes apart, but their intensity left no doubt. Our daughter was coming early. Michael calmly timed the contractions while packing the car with our hospital bags. By 4 a.m., when contractions had progressed to 7 minutes apart, we decided to head to the hospital. In the midst of preparing to leave, Michael asked the question we'd been avoiding. "Should we call your parents now?" We'd previously agreed to wait until labor was well established before notifying them, giving ourselves privacy during the early stages. But now, faced with the reality of our daughter's imminent arrival, the decision carried emotional weight. "Not yet," I decided. "Let's get to the hospital and make sure this is really it. There will be plenty of time to call them later." This choice wasn't about spite or punishment. It was about protecting the sacred space of birth from any potential tension or stress. Our daughter deserved to enter the world surrounded by complete calm and love. The labor progressed rapidly after we arrived at the hospital. By noon, I was fully dilated and ready to push. The delivery room remained peaceful, just Michael, myself, and the medical team focused entirely on bringing our daughter safely into the world. At 1:27 p.m., Hannah Grace Wilson arrived, weighing 6 pounds, 4 ounces, with a strong cry and perfect APGAR scores. The moment she was placed on my chest, time seemed to stop. Her tiny fingers curled around Michael's pinky as he leaned over us, tears streaming down his face. In that perfect moment, the family drama faded completely. This was all that mattered. Our daughter, healthy and beautiful, finally in our arms after so many months of anticipation. It wasn't until 3 hours later, when we'd been moved to a recovery room and had our first attempts at breastfeeding, that Michael gently reminded me about calling my parents. I nodded, suddenly eager to share our joy despite the complicated feelings. My father answered on the second ring, his voice casual, until I shared our news. His immediate joy quickly gave way to hurt when he realized we'd been at the hospital for hours without telling them. Why didn't you call us when you went into labor? He asked, the pain evident in his voice. We needed this time, Dad. I explained gently. Just the three of us, without any complications. But we want you and Mom to come meet her now, if you'd like. They arrived 45 minutes later, my mother's eyes red from crying. Whether from joy about her granddaughter or hurt about being excluded from the birth, I couldn't tell. But when Hannah was placed in her arms, everything else seemed to disappear. My father stood beside her, one hand on my mother's shoulder, the other gently touching Hannah's dark hair. She's perfect, Mom whispered. Absolutely perfect. The unspoken question hung in the air. Where was Amber? I answered before they could ask. I think it's best if Amber waits a bit before meeting Hannah. Just until we're home and settled. I hope you understand. To my surprise, they both nodded without argument. Perhaps the reality of holding their actual grandchild had clarified things for them in a way our conversations hadn't. Amber's having a difficult day anyway, my father said quietly. This news, it might be better to ease into it. Their visit was brief, but healing in its way. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm sorry we didn't believe you. About everything.
I'm so sorry, Natalie.
It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start, an acknowledgement of how their actions had contributed to the painful situation. The first 3 months with Hannah were a beautiful blur of sleepless nights, newborn snuggles, and adjusting to our new reality as parents. Michael took extended paternity leave, creating a protective bubble around our little family as we found our footing. My parents visited regularly, always respectful of our boundaries, never pushing for Amber to be included before we were ready. Through them, I received updates about Amber's progress. She had returned to consistent therapy, found a medication regimen that seemed to help, and had begun a part-time job at a local bookstore. She no longer spoke about her fictional pregnancy and had deleted all social media accounts to focus on her recovery without digital distractions. As Hannah reached the 3-month mark, I felt ready to consider the next step in family healing. After discussing it thoroughly with Michael and consulting with Amber's therapist, we agreed to a supervised meeting between Amber and Hannah. The therapist suggested her office as a neutral location where she could facilitate the interaction and intervene if necessary. The day of the meeting, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, nervousness, hope, lingering anger, and compassion for my sister's struggles. Michael and I arrived with Hannah sleeping peacefully in her carrier, her chubby cheeks flushed pink from the car ride. Amber was already there, sitting stiffly on the edge of a couch in the therapist's office. She looked healthier than the last time I'd seen her, her eyes clearer, her posture more confident. When we entered, she stood but maintained her distance, clearly respecting the boundaries we'd established. Thank you for coming, she said simply. I've been looking forward to meeting her. The therapist guided us through the interaction, suggesting I hold Hannah while Amber sat nearby, allowing the baby to become accustomed to her presence. As Hannah woke and began to look around curiously, Amber's reserved demeanor softened. She has your eyes, she observed quietly. The same shape. After some time, I asked if she'd like to hold her niece. The moment Hannah settled into Amber's arms, something shifted in my sister's expression, a complicated mix of joy, grief, and acceptance. I'm so sorry, Natalie, she said, looking up from Hannah's face to meet my eyes directly. What I did was unforgivable. I tried to steal something that wasn't mine to take, not just the ultrasound pictures, but your experience, your joy. I convinced myself I deserved it more, that somehow your pregnancy was unfair to me. I see now how sick that thinking was. Her acknowledgement, delivered while holding the very real result of my pregnancy, struck me deeply. This wasn't the defensive sister I'd known, but someone who had confronted her own demons and emerged with painful self-awareness. I don't expect us to be close again, she continued. But I hope someday Hannah can know me as her aunt, not as the person who did this terrible thing. Motherhood had changed my perspective on many things, including forgiveness. The fierce love I felt for Hannah made me understand both the depth of Amber's pain and the importance of healing family wounds if possible. Not for my sake or even for Amber's, but for Hannah, who deserved to know her family, the healthy, healing versions of them. It will take time, I said honestly. Trust rebuilds slowly. But we're here today, and that's a start. Over the following months, our parents worked diligently to rebuild their relationship with Michael and me. They acknowledged their role in enabling Amber's behavior over the years and committed to more balanced family dynamics moving forward. Family therapy continued, sometimes with all of us together, sometimes in various smaller groupings. The healing wasn't linear or complete. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged, when trust wavered, when the hurt felt fresh again.
But there was also progress.
Amber maintained her treatment, developed healthier coping mechanisms, and gradually earned small measures of trust through consistent, respectful behavior. By Hannah's first birthday, we had established a new normal. Amber attended the small celebration, bringing an age-appropriate gift and interacting appropriately with her niece. She had begun dating again, this time with the support of her therapist to ensure she maintained healthy relationship boundaries. My parents had found their footing as grandparents, pouring their nurturing energy into Hannah rather than enabling unhealthy dynamics with their adult daughters. As for me, motherhood had taught me more about boundaries, forgiveness, and family than I ever expected to learn. The betrayal from my sister had cut deeply precisely because family has unique power to hurt us. But family also has unique capacity for healing when all parties commit to the difficult work required. Hannah will grow up knowing a version of our family that's healthier than the one that existed before her birth. Someday, when she's much older, she might learn the full story of what happened before her arrival. But more importantly, she'll know the story of how her family healed, imperfectly, gradually, but genuinely. If you've ever experienced a deep betrayal from a family member, I hope my story offers some comfort. The road to healing isn't quick or easy, but it is possible. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most can change, and sometimes the process of establishing boundaries actually leads to healthier relationships in the long run. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply betrayed your trust? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after the most painful betrayals. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary.